going great, and they're only getting better.
All right, section 2 of Speaking to Persuade, and we have just finished talking about what is persuasion and the 4 ways we can do that. And then we also talked about a strategy that is a great way to sort of launch writing a persuasive speech. Now we're going to talk about a model that is really useful in figuring out how to be successful persuading people, and it's called the Elaboration Likelihood Model. And in this model, elaboration is the amount of effort one uses to process and evaluate a message, remember it, and then accept or reject it. Another way to think of it, although altogether much too general, is the likelihood that someone will think. So the ELM is a model of cognitive response, that's thinking, that's used for persuasion. It was developed by researchers named Petty and Cacioppo. Also, a researcher named Chaikin did a similar model, and now these 2 models are based on a 2-route system and are kind of seen collectively because their concepts were so similar. In this model, we have these 2 routes, right? And one of them, it goes up, and we call that the central route, or system 2 if you're using Chaikin's language, and the other one goes down, and that's called the peripheral route, or system 1. The central route uses arguments to accomplish attitude change, and the peripheral route uses cues to accomplish attitude change. Arguments are thoughts relevant to the proposition in an effort to determine the merits of the position pitched at us. This comes from Petty and Cacioppo, but essentially it's saying, what are the thoughts we have in response to a pitch someone gives us? So if they're trying to get you to buy an Apple instead of a PC, what are the thoughts we have, negative or positive? If we are generating thoughts, we're thinking in the central route. All right. If they're trying to convince us to buy one or the other using evidence or reason, then they're working in the central route. The peripheral route uses cues. Cues are pieces of information leveraged for more shortcut thinking. We use these tiny pieces of information that are less intensively created and require less energy to process to make decisions. Examples might be color, attractiveness, or even a feeling about the topic. You'd be shocked how many people make quick choices about cars once they arrive on the lot. Even though they've done their research before getting there, they go right for their peripheral route thinking because they got convinced by cues. So central route uses arguments. This is information that's relevant, okay? It's evidence and reasoning relevant to the topic. Peripheral route uses cues. It's relevant, but only because it's related. It's not relevant specifically. So, okay, so think about this. One route requires high energy thinking, and the other requires low energy thinking. Low energy is on the peripheral route where we make quick decisions. High energy is on the central route where we make slower decisions. Uses a lot more energy to think like this, right? This is studying for a test. This is doing hardcore homework. This is all the other stuff in between. Peripheral route thinking is. Sitting in a classroom, you might have an intuition that you should be evaluating the central route as much better. And I can see that. But the truth is that to function in the world, we have got to be cognitive misers. We have to have simple and fast methods for making decisions most of the time during each day. That's how we're able to talk on the phone and cross the street without falling or getting killed, my friends, because we spend most of our time on the peripheral route. We're cognitive misers. We don't want to expend that energy thinking hard and heavy with arguments on the central route. We want to be on the peripheral route where we don't have to expend as much energy. When in doubt, assume the audience is on the peripheral route. When in doubt, take the peripheral route. If that's the case, then when are we willing to think hard and process systematically? So let's pause for a moment there. Central route thinking is also called systematic thinking. Peripheral route thinking is also called heuristic thinking. Systematic and central, heuristic and peripheral. So when are we willing to do this heavy thinking, this heavy lifting, if you will? Generally speaking, we have to be both motivated and able to process centrally in order to do that. So it's about motivation and ability. See, we were talking earlier about the audience's motivation. That's why we see an application for this here. We have to want to and have the capacity to. If either of them are low, either of those are low, but especially if both of them are, then we will go the peripheral route. Now, somebody, and I can't recall or find who, but somebody figured out that it's easy to call this high watt and low watt. High willingness and ability to think. Willingness, ability to think. And low watt, right? If we have plenty of it, we'll go up here. If we don't, we'll go down here. Here's the really interesting thing. Either way, we get attitude change. Absolutely, either way, we get attitude change. We can realize the audience is high watt and give them all kinds of thought generating information. That would be really smart with a high watt audience. We could give them all kinds of cues if we realized they were a low watt audience. That would be really smart if we knew they were a low watt audience. Either way, we're using what we know about the audience. Attitude change in both cases. This Brain Tricks video, which I want you to watch on your own time, is incredible at making this super clear. It gives you immediately accessible, immediately applicable examples to demonstrate how thinking fast and thinking slow, thinking peripherally and thinking centrally work. I'm going to let you watch that on your own time. When you get through this PowerPoint or get to this PowerPoint, you can click on this Brain Tricks video. Also, the Brain Tricks video link will be on Blackboard for you. High watt, right? Motivation and ability, willingness and ability to think, relies more on evidence and reasoning. Low watt relies more on cues, speaker ethos, and heuristics. And we know that both of them get attitude change. But here's a new piece of information because this is about the impact of two-route thinking. Attitude changes on the central route are more long-lasting. They are less likely to change, and they are more predictive of behavior. More long-lasting, less likely to be flopped back to the original thinking or any other thinking, and they are more likely to predict behavior. That's the big difference between high watt and low watt impact. Before we look at what makes taking one route more likely than the other, let me clarify one thing, and that is what is a cue in one situation can be an argument in another. Oh, mind-blowing, I know. This is why you have to do your audience analysis. Take a look at the ad on the left. The blonde is functioning as a cue, right? She isn't specifically relevant to the arguments about a car, the weight, the mileage, the tires, any of that stuff. Buy this car and you'll get great hair. But hair has nothing to do with the facts that should help us buy a car. Neither does being blonde, actually. But in the ad on the right, the product is shampoo. If you have a photo of beautiful hair and an ad for shampoo, then the beautiful hair is an argument. Great reason is a reason. Great hair is a reason to buy shampoo. It's a reason. So in the ad on the right, the hair model is an argument. And the ad on the left, the hair and model is a cue. So if you're processing peripherally, this is a cue. If you're processing centrally, this is an argument. Hat tip to Dr. Booth Butterfield in his blog called Healthy Influence. Just keep in mind that what seems like a cue isn't always a cue and vice versa. What are things if the central route is what gives us more persistence and resistance and predictability of behavior. What are some things that help us go to the central route thinking? Well, the first thing is the more relevant the information is, the more important it is to it, the more important to the audience it is, the more likely they are to think systematically or centrally. Second, if the audience has a high need for cognition, that is, they really like thinking, then they are more likely to think centrally. That's pretty straightforward, right? If you're not starting from scratch with your audience, if they already have a schema for the concept and they aren't, like starting from, I've never heard of that, then they don't have to work so hard. Remember that we are cognitive misers, and if I don't have to use as much energy, I'm more likely to think about it. The fewer the distractions, number 4, the greater the chance that the audience will be willing to exert energy and think centrally. The quality of the argument has an effect on the likelihood of central processing too. When the message is highly personally relevant, then the quality of the argument is even more important, and central route processing becomes more likely. Finally, people are more likely to centrally process a message from multiple sources than a message that comes from one source. This is one of the reasons your highly credible evidence is important. So, amount of wattage affects which route we process in. Central route gets more persistence, resistance, and predictability of behavior. Cues can get an attitude change, and sometimes faster too, but it doesn't necessarily last as long. That's the ELM. So how do we use it in public speaking? We ask, what is the wattage of my audience? How willing and able are they to think? If the audience is low watt, we're very generous with cues. If the audience is high watt, we're very generous with reasons and facts. And we should look at the right combination of those. So we have to be very strategic in our choices of being on the central or peripheral route. Even though, generally speaking, people are on the peripheral route because that's what keeps us going all day. In a speech, we can maybe judge it a bit ahead of time with a good audience analysis. So, wow, the ELM is a super powerful tool. No questions. No question about it. What are other constraints besides wattage in our audiences? And that's where we're going to go next in part 3 of this video.